Welcome to your Joyful Riches podcast, where you gain precious tips and tools for creating the life that you love and the result that you love. This podcast is delivered alongside the G100 Global Networking and powered by Anchor FM. This awesome free podcast made easy platform. And for this week, we are so thrilled and so honored to have Kristen Corey with us. And it is such an amazing opportunity that I'm so grateful, Kristen, to meet you just in time for our World Bees Days. That I actually didn't know there is such a thing until this year, to be honest. So Kristen, would you share with us really quick what is it that you do?
Well, first I'm mom, right? As a lot of us are, that's first. And then alongside that, I do part-time work as a chef and a beekeeper. So I am the beekeeper for a local farm here called Sunbury Urban Farm. And we like to run the bees there on the farm, both for educational purposes for the kids' camps, and obviously also to help pollinate all the veggies and fruits growing there.
Oh, wow, amazing. So you are a superwoman. You are a mom, you are a chef, and you're a beekeeper. I recall you mentioned, I think in our communications that you have a degree in geologist. And is that how did you end up working with bee? Did you kind of like growing up, and said, "Oh, look at the bees. I want to work with bees and all these things." How did you end up working with bees? Because that's not the most common occupations.
Yeah, it's not. And especially I think it's changing, but for women, there were not a lot of women in beekeeping when I started doing it. So I decided to be a zoologist. I went to college. I went to the Ohio State University for a degree in zoology from the Department of Evolution, Ecology, and Organismal Biology. And so you actually get a degree in all three things: the evolution, ecology, and then the organismal biology. But I just decided to spend more time studying the organisms, which is zoology. And so part of my degree was I needed to find a work study position. And one morning I walked in our main building and there was a sign, beekeepers wanted. And I thought, well, I've never done that before. And I called the number and I got the job right away. I guess a lot of people didn't want to do it. So I started working my sophomore year in college at the Ohio State University Rothenbuehler Honeybee Laboratory, which is on our West Campus. And I had the honor and privilege to work for Susan Kobe, who is one of the world's leading researchers in honeybee breeding and genetics, and is doing cutting edge work with sort of figuring out how we can help the bees through what a lot of people have heard, which is the colony collapse disorder. So when you hear about, oh, we're losing our bees, that's kind of what's going on. So I got to learn from her, and I've been beekeeping ever since.
Wow,
So
that is so
24 years
awesome.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that is so cool. You're kind of like being led into beekeeping.
Yeah.
I must from what you shared just now, I have two questions, and
Mm-hmm.
the first one, one of them you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but when I'm thinking about bee, and a lot of people whom I know, they're kind of like, oh, bees don't get sting, because the bees sting, right?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I honestly have a different, the same reaction. I'm also allergic to bees, so like if I were to get
Oh,
sick,
yeah. You have to
but
be
it's
careful.
kind of like, do you not when you first did that, did you not kind of like worry you're gonna get stung?
Well, my boss, who is, she's wonderful. She's just a wonderful person, but very professional. And she said, "You're going to get stung. Let's get out there and get you stung up." And I was like, okay. So all the questions about that are, yes, you should be afraid of bees, right? No, nobody wants to be stung. It's normal to be scared of bees. And the stinging is a self-defense mechanism for them. Two, I always get stung a lot, even though I try really hard not to. And three, it always hurts. I don't react to it, so I don't swell, but it always hurts a lot. So you just kind of get used to it. Because of the specialized work I did with the queen bees, I rarely wear beekeeping gloves. So I just have bare hands.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it means you have to learn to move in a particular way when you're in the hive. So you're slow, you're cautious, and you're careful when you're working in the hive.
So
So that's, yeah.
it's, I guess in a little bit, and this is probably because I'm a grief specialist and coach, right? But in a way, I guess it's kind of like life. Life stings sometimes, but
Sometimes it hurts.
yeah, and then sometimes life stings and it hurts, and you know, I mean, in living life, you know, who knows? It's going to be something called like the COVID, right, and all these other things, the inflations, what have you, and so life stings sometimes, but you kind of get to, like you said, you got to do it anyway. You don't want to go hiding, and then you want to move mindfully is what I'm hearing. You got to move mindfully, move, you know, whatever way. It's kind of like a little bit, you dance your hand. I kind of almost having these visualizations. Your hand dance inside of the beehive, bare hand, never mind, without protections. So you minimize the sting and bringing benefit. That is so neat. That is so cool.
Well, you really described it well. It really is a dance. There absolutely is a flow state or a Zen state, you know, a mindful state of mind when you're working bees. You absolutely have to be present. You can't be worried about what's going to happen or what did happen, because it takes you out of that concentration and you lose track of where you are. And the bees can tell. They kind of know you're distracted.
The bees can tell. That's interesting.
Yeah, but it absolutely is a dance. I've been a dancer my whole life. And so I think when I started working as a beekeeper, I was like, oh, this is kind of the same thing, you know? And it's in that way for me, even though I know I may get hurt doing it, it's very also healing for me to do it. Because the sensation of working bees is you open the hive and there's the sound, there's this gentle buzz, then there's the smell, then there's the feel and texture of all the wax and the combs, and the bees themselves will sometimes just land on you and they're light and soft. So it's really it can be a very beautiful experience. You just have to like not think ahead, like I might get stung. You just don't think about it.
Right. Oh, that is so interesting. Somehow the bee conversations move to life, but it is part of life. It's kind of like everything.
It's so true.
Part of nature. I actually founded and delivered a program called Dance Away Sadness. So when you say that just now, very healing. It's very and many people don't know this about experience and grief. When we experience grief, it's not only in our mind, it goes in our heart and in our body. And what you say just now was so beautiful, because, you know, like you said, you might get hurt, or with life, you will get hurt. It's not if you might, but in that process, it can also be for you healing, sounds like, with the texture and the sound and being able to be or needing, sounds like, to be present, because the bee can tell. That's really interesting. That is so wonderful. That's so neat. And the other thing you mentioned just now, particularly back in the day, sounds like it's an occupation that is rare for women to do. Is there a particular reason for that? Does women tend to react more when, like, physically when they got stung by bee, or it's just like many other things, it's a discrepancy?
I think that, well, first we need to differentiate between commercial beekeeping and what are considered hobbyists. So hobbyists might keep 1 to 3 or 4 hives on their property. They enjoy doing it. They're doing it for the honey. So there are a lot of women who do hobby beekeeping. There are not a lot of women in commercial beekeeping or in the academia part of beekeeping. And I believe that's changing. I'm not any longer in the academics part of it. And I've lost touch with a lot of the commercial beekeepers I used to do consulting work for. But when I started, it would be myself and my boss, Sue, in a room with about 30 men. And it was very rare to come across another female beekeeper that was of that sort of like caliber, not caliber necessarily, but like in the commercial world. Commercial beekeepers will keep anywhere from 5,000 to 50,000 hives.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot of heavy lifting. One super or one box that's full of drawn honey will weigh up to 200 pounds. So there is a huge physicality to the job if you're doing it commercially. It's mostly big guys, and that there's kind of a reason for it. We used a lot of, when I was working at OSU, we had up to 300 hives on the OSU properties at Ohio State University. And so we would use a lot of dollies. We would use a lot of straps to lift. We definitely were mindful of keeping our bodies safe. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of hard physical labor. And I think that might be part of what has kept women out of doing large scale commercial beekeeping. I'm not saying they can't do it. I certainly did it. And then the other part of it, honestly, I just think it's one of those things that it was traditionally a lot of men. And it's definitely changing now. So I like to see how it's changing. I like seeing more and more women academically pursuing research about honeybees and beekeeping, particularly with colony collapse disorder. Commercially, I see more and more women owning the large scale commercial beekeeping companies. So yeah, I think it's like a lot of things, like the restaurant world. Being a chef, I was one of the only women chefs, working in a restaurant for a while too. I think it's definitely changing, and I like to see that it is changing.
That is so awesome. You are a pioneer. That is very true. I grew up in the restaurant industry, and yeah, so you're pioneer in the beekeeping as well as, yes, and the chef
Yeah.
a long time. It was mostly gentlemen, and
Yeah.
so thank you for pioneering. Thank you for pioneering.
Oh,
You mentioned like one thing of hives can weigh so much, like some 200 pounds or something. Holy moly. And
yeah.
how many, when people think about bees many times, or myself at least, the next thought comes is honey and pollinations. That's how limited, right? The honey pollinations. How many,
Yeah.
like, we buy honey by the bottle or by the pound or something like that. So how many is this correct? Like, I read somewhere that to to make a pound of honey, just a pound of honey, the bees need to take like the pollen and the nectar from like some 2 million flowers
Yeah.
and fly 90,000 miles of flight total, which is twice around, 3 times around the world, just
Yeah.
to make a pound of honey. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Well, I mean, that's a generalization. I mean, it depends on your nectar sources and how close the bees are to them and how heavy. So honey comes from nectar. When flowers are producing nectar, we call that the nectar flow. So when beekeepers say the flow is on, it means that certain flowers are blooming and the bees are collecting nectar adamantly from those flowers. So if bees are close to a lot of those nectar sources, like for example, a beekeeper puts hives in a canola field, which is a common practice. They're right there where all the flowers are blooming. It's less legwork for them to have to go get their food. In general, bees will fly up to a mile radius to gather nectar from one flower or several, and then fly back. So if you think about how big they are and how far they travel, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. Nectar is their sugar or carbohydrate source, and pollen is their protein source. So when they go to collect from flowers, they're both collecting pollen that they can eat and store for protein, and also the nectar, which goes into like a gullet and then is regurgitated in the hive to be processed or cured into honey. A lot of work. There are anywhere between 10,000 to 60,000 bees in one hive. That's a lot of individuals doing a lot of work.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
it's quite something, and a lot of that is a lot of work, and thankfully a lot of individuals, and
Mhm.
and all those now each hive only have one queen, right?
Yes. Yeah, there is one queen for the entire hive. So a little bee biology. The queen is the only reproductive member of the hive. So it's only her laying all of the eggs that turn into both workers and also males of the hive. So honeybees are what we call a haplodiploid mating system, meaning that the workers are haploid. They have genes from both the mother and father. The workers are diploid. The males are haploid. So diploid means di, meaning two. They have two sets of genes. Haploid is half. So the males only have one set of genes directly from the queen. The queen herself will lay up to 3,000 eggs a day, depending on how the population needs to be repopulated. She has
3,000
a
eggs a
lifespan,
day.
3,000 eggs a day. That's a lot of eggs. She's very capable. The queen is the center of the hive. She is what holds together the entire beehive through her pheromones. So the pheromones that she exudes are circulated through fanning of the workers to basically fan through the entire hive, and it creates a cohesive behavior that keeps the hive working together and working really well. So as queens age, they can live up to 8 years, 9 years sometimes, but as they age, they lose pheromone. And you'll begin to see that effective in the hive, that they're spotty, they're not collecting as much nectar as they should. And so we call that a failing queen. And it's a common practice in beekeeping that you put a new queen in the hives every year. Some people keep queens for 2 years, but usually she needs to be replaced so that sort of maximum efficiency is maintained in the hive for beekeepers. So yeah, the queen is central. If you don't have a queen, you don't have a hive.
Wow, that is so interesting. And the queen could produce 3,000 eggs. I mean, maybe because this is Mother's Day's month, it's kind of make me think about being a
Yeah,
mother, right? I mean, the queen
a
is
lot of work.
mother for all the bees, and
Yeah,
I mean that's quite
yeah,
success for mama there. The bee.
yes, yeah.
Oh my
But
goodness.
but then when the eggs, the eggs will hatch into baby bees, into the workers. Then all of the workers take care of the queen, right? The queen never has to go out and forage for food. They clean her constantly, which we call hygienic behavior, and they clean each other. So all of her babies are constantly taking care of her all of the time, which is, it's a beautiful thing. It's lovely when you're working a hive and you find the queen, you can like watch her for a little bit, because they form, as she moves through the hive, all the worker bees will form a circle around her facing in, and we call that the queen's court. So they're always facing her, cleaning her and helping her and fanning the pheromones throughout the hive.
But and sounds like from what you're saying, the queens releases this pheromone that tells like you say, coordinate the cohesiveness of the hives, and so they will know. In other words, if the queen is some ill or something, not or the queen's not happy for whatever reason, the queen's not happy, it will affect the whole hives then.
It will. Yeah. You can
Wow.
tell the entire health of the hive has to do with the health of the queen. So it's all dependent on her. And sometimes queens don't, get enough food as babies and they emerge small. And sometimes, sometimes they get killed by other queens. If there's another queen in the hive, there shouldn't be, but sometimes that happens. And so when you have a queenless hive, that's a big issue. You need to basically get a new queen into the hive right away, or the hive will die without her.
Wow. Yeah. And in the strangest analogy, it's kind of really like the family, the even human family unit. I mean, there is a saying that if mama's not happy,
yeah,
the whole family is not happy. And also if mama's traumatized, like you say, the queens didn't get enough food or something when growing up to become a queen, there is so-called childhood trauma. It might not be able to perform well, and then it's affecting the whole hives. And that is sometimes, I would say, in a strange side way for everyone here. The key lesson right now at this very moment is keep your mamas happy.
The mama's happy.
Not only on Mother's Day, but just like the bees, every day. And for mamas, if you have things going on, if you have things going on in the childhood that's still following you, then you want to have it resolved so your family can be happy.
It's
and self-care, right? I mean, allowing you to be like the queen bees, to be taken care, that you'll be able to be present for the whole family, the whole hives.
Yep. Oh yes. Yeah, the beehive it's a fascinating orchestration of all of the different parts working together, and that the mama is really at the center of it. The boys the boys are so cute. They're sort of big and fat and fuzzy, and they have no stingers. But all they really do is hang out around the edge of the hive and beg for food from the girls, and then eventually they go up and mate and die. And that's pretty much their life. That's all I get to do.
That is funny. Now, for the gentlemen out there, definitely you can do more than just the boys hang out on the edges and for food. There is certain things of bees that we want to follow, and some maybe not.
Some not. Yeah, some not. It's okay. It's okay.
But they are cute and fuzzy. That is so cute.
They're so cute.
It's funny that you mentioned earlier the pheromones effect. Nowadays, the new study shows that in a different aspect of life with grief, we know that when people experiencing something, so back to being mother of a family, like a queen, it's the pheromones. And I don't know, the bees apparently will be different, but we know this in people. When we experience something in our heart, so let's say we feel angry or we feel sad or we feel happy or love. Nowadays, they have studies showing that what's going on in your heart actually affects the heart rhythm of people and animal all the way across the room without us having to communicate with each other. These are EKG studies that we have. And you have one person here connected to EKG, the other person the other end, or a pet on the other end of the room. And the one person change emotions or feelings, they see changes in the EKG in both ends. And so it's kind of like the vibrations and, like you said, the pheromones affect everybody around you. That is so Interesting. And really, I mean, that everything we do affect everything and everyone else's in this world. So with that in mind, sometimes we do things in life without realizing that the harm that it can cause to other
Yeah.
people or to bees, right? Are there a few things for to educate our audience? Are there a few things that you see people commonly do, and perhaps without really being aware about, that can harm bees?
Yeah, there are quite a few things. And I want to make sure we clarify too, when we're talking about bees, there are honeybees, which I work with primarily. And the honeybee is actually an invasive species to North America. It's from Europe. It's the European honeybee. And then there are also bees that are native to North America, and those are what we call native pollinators. So currently in the United States, I do, and I think Canada right now, 60% of pollination happens from our native pollinators. 40% is happening from the European honeybees. And so when we talk about these ecosystems, I just wanted to clarify that there is a difference. And I do acknowledge as an ecologist that the animals I work with are invasive, but they're here, and we do need them within our economy. And I like to say most people like to enjoy honey. And we do need them for pollination for our agricultural systems as well. So something that sort of anybody can do to help any pollinators, whether they're native or non-native, is to, if you can, limit the use of pesticide sprays in and around your home, especially outside of the home. And that goes for herbicide sprays as well. Something as simple as Roundup, that can be detrimental to honeybees or pollinators in many different ways. But I've seen a lot. I've consulted on jobs, both just hobby beekeepers keeping a few hives at their house to commercial enterprises running 20, 30,000 hives. And I've seen what pesticide kill looks like. It leaves a trail of dead bees coming from and going to the hive. So even though it seems like, oh, this isn't a lot of pesticide use, I'm just spraying here and there, really try and figure out, do I need to spray with this in this location? Now, if it's for something like mosquito control, yeah, I get it. Mosquitoes are carrying a lot of dangerous diseases. We don't want them around. But it's just something you have to consider. And then when it comes to herbicide use, if you're spraying herbicides in and around your home, I understand people love to have their manicured lawns, but they're basically dead zones for pollinators. There's no food there for them, and it contains chemicals that can harm them. So something to consider, if you have a yard, you may enjoy gardening, you may not, it's anyone's guess. But if you can limit the amount of pesticide and herbicide spray, that is a big help. If you can plant native plants that our pollinators like, there are a lot of websites out there that have lists and lists of these plants. If you can plant those, great. They're kind of like little way stations for our pollinators where they can stop and gather food. So those two things are very simple. It's just minimizing spray and planting and encouraging native plant species that our pollinators like to visit. Honestly, one of the best things you can keep in your yard are dandelions. Dandelions and clover, both of those are excellent food sources for pollinators. Dandelions are one of the first protein sources for bees in the spring when they're coming out of what is a very long fasting period through the winter time. So when they first wake up in spring, they're really hungry. Dandelions are one of the first flowers out there, and they really help the bees get through that time and not starve to death.
Wow, that's super awesome. Dandelions and clover.
Clover, if it's in your area, obviously, I'm familiar with East Coast and Midwest. I'm not familiar with the Western, flora and fauna so much. But yeah, anything that as a native plant that you might think doesn't look great in your grass lawn. It's actually great food source for our pollinators.
Oh, that's interesting. Anything that's native that doesn't look great in your grass lawn, but it's great good food
It's
source.
true.
Oh,
Sorry.
that is interesting. Here in California, we all on about in limiting water here, California,
Yes.
and so some of those, you can, I know some of the things you can also grow in pots, and instead of having big giant lawn that's almost impossible to maintain when
It's hard.
when you're limiting water. So that is
Yeah.
so that is so beautiful. Now, if some people say, this is so interesting, this is so cool, and they want to start keeping bees, even as a hobby, perhaps, are there resources that you can direct us to learn more about bees, or if we're interested in keeping bees, know that you're going to get stung, but it will be okay and it'll be healing. So
As long as you're not allergic, don't do it if you're allergic, please. Yes. And actually, it's the second bee sting that usually indicates allergy. So you just need to pay attention to that. So all throughout the United States are beekeeping associations. Here in Columbus, Ohio, we have the Central Ohio Beekeepers Association. A lot of universities also have introductory or 101 beekeeping classes or information available through the university that you can participate in things. I know that Ohio State University has many, many, many beekeeping classes. Right now, they're running a class for veterans. So if you've served in the military, I think this is a nationwide program. I could be wrong about that. So there's a lot of resources out there. Or if you happen to meet a beekeeper at your local farmer's market, if you go to a local farmer's market, there's usually beekeepers that are selling honey, their honey, which is a great way to support them. And it's delicious and healthy for you, as long as you can handle the sugar. So you can also just ask your local beekeeper, hey, how did you get started? Is there an organization you belong to? Are they teaching beekeeping classes? So there's a lot of resources out there.
Super, super, super awesome. And as we complete our conversation, this is so fascinating and so interesting. And so don't do bees if you're allergic to the sting. But otherwise, if you have the space and the interest, perhaps check out the bee. But as we complete our conversations today, do you have a final message for our audience in creating this, helping with the bees and creating the ecosystems and everything?
So I think the final message, as a zoologist and ecologist and beekeeper, I would say, and also chef, is that one of the best ways you can help bees, everyone's like, save the bees, oh, the bees. One of the best ways you can do this is by buying from and supporting local farmers who are doing regenerative, organic, biodynamic, local farmers, because they're usually using farming methods that are very healthy for bees. I'm not saying that other farmers aren't doing a great job, because it's hard work and we appreciate all of our farmers. But if you can support our local farmers, anyone growing food near you that is growing in ways that are more harmonious, more ecologically sound, it's going to send a message in general that we want to do things that are good for our ecologies. We want to be environmentally friendly. And all of those things support bee health. So moving away from large pesticide sprays, large herbicide usage, and soil degradation all contributes to bee health. So it seems like a small thing, but really it's one of the most important ways you can make a big impact ecologically. And it's very easy to do for most people. There's usually a farmer's market near where you live.
Right, shop locals, goes to the farmer markets. It's more it's a lot of fun that way too anyway. So
And
thank
you
you
get
so
tasty stuff. You get tasty things to cook too. Cook the tasty things.
right, cook the tasty things. That is very true. And we everything we mentioned this earlier in our conversation earlier. Everything is connected. It's not like we human and then there is everything else out there. It's everything, as you said, is connected. When even the slightest change on your herbicide, or even just by shopping local, you're helping the farmers and you're helping the bees and you're helping the environment, and then in turn it's going all around helping you and a lot of time healthier, being more natural product too. So that is so
Yep.
great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christine. I so appreciate
Welcome.
for sharing your tips and wisdom and knowledge with us about bees and how it's kind of like a little bit like dance with life and a mother. I do have one more questions if you don't mind, really quick. I
Oh,
hear somewhere, and it might be a completely wrong information, that bee communicate through dance.
yes. Yes. How did we miss that one? The bee dance. The bee dance. It's so lovely. So bees navigate by olfactory trails. They smell where they're going versus they can see, but they usually navigate by smell. So when they come back, they do a dance to the other bees to tell them about the smell roadway they just took and where the flowers are. And the other bees can tell through this dance exactly how to get there. It's so cute too. It's the cutest little dance you've ever seen.
Wow, that is so amazing. That's so
Beautiful.
amazing. You,
Yeah.
you just through the dance. I mean, imagine
Just
that. Imagine the brilliance of that. Imagine if you go and find your newest restaurant in town, then all you must do, all you can do is you got to do certain dance move. So your
yeah.
family can now go find that restaurant. I
Yes.
think I will
Yes.
pass that test. But wow, that is so amazing. That's such an intricate thing. I'm glad that comes to my mind suddenly.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't know how I forgot about the bee dance. It's like one of the best things. It's so great.
Wow, bee dance. And if you feel you can dance, look at the bees. You might be inspired. So that is so awesome. Thank you so much for this beautiful, fun conversations. Thank you so much. And for our audience, you've seen how this beautiful and fun this is, and a lot of full wealth of amazing knowledge about bees and life and mommy and moms. And so please share this with your friends and families, and because they too deserve to know this, deserve to be able to dance with life with more ease and fun, and for all of us together to thrive. And so thank you so much again, Christine, and for my friend for participating today. And this is Dr. BirgitteTan's the G100 Country Chairs Global Networking of USA, and your grief transformation specialist and founder of the International Childhood Cancer Charity. And I thank you very much for joining us.